We have already had Verdun, we have already had Tannenberg. Now it is time for Isonzo, a World War I first-person shooter set in the Italian Alps. Actually, I'd hoped to be playing this game by now already, as it was actually originally supposed to be released in, well, now, late 2021. But it's now been pushed back to early 2022. So I thought we would cover a little bit why I'm excited for this game, alongside a few concerns that I have as well. So put the kettle on, grab yourself a cup of tea, as we dive into Isonzo. Now, we obviously know what Blackmill Games, the developer here, can do. We've already had Verdun, set in the merciless trench warfare of the Western Front. We then, in 2019, got Tannenberg, set on the Eastern Front. It felt like a distinctly improved game, larger maps, and in my opinion, more polished and well-rounded game. Although, I must admit, I think it was slightly helped by the setting. The Eastern Front in the First World War tends to lend itself more to the open and manoeuvrable gameplay compared to the fairly confined brutality of the Verdun trench warfare. Although I think we're hopefully going to see some of that manoeuvrability again in Isonzo, which is a good sign. As we mentioned at the start, Isonzo is going to be set in the rugged mountainous terrain of the Italian Alps. You're going to have to fight your way up these sort of steep mountainsides, narrow twisting paths, not only being shot at but probably trying to not fall off as well. There won't be many trenches here though. The terrain, sort of the rocky mountainous terrain, really doesn't lend itself to sort of entrenching yourself, digging down when it's going to be on rock. Instead, you're going to be making use of the rocks and natural defences that you can find, setting up machine gun nests, attacking positions. Honestly, it's really kind of exciting, and that's what gets me excited about this game. It's great to not only see another World War I game, which is enough in itself, because we really don't get very many World War I games, and I think when we do, I'm looking at you, Battlefield 1, they tend to be almost like a World War II version of World War I. They make use of all the rare and experimental machine guns, and that kind of loses a little bit of what World War I is all about. They made it so action-packed that it wasn't really very World War I. So I think it's great that we're getting games like this, but it's even better to see that it's focusing on the Italian and Austro-Hungarian fighting in the Alps, which is, let's face it, a period that isn't really covered in very many games. And let's face it, we know the game is going to be good. You only have to look at the Steam reviews of Verdun and Tannenberg, both of which are listed as very positive, to see that this is more than likely going to be another high quality game. However, I do also have a few concerns. Firstly, player population. Whilst both Verdun and Tannenberg are now available on console, which should, in theory, help boost player numbers, the PC population, at least according to Steam charts, is pretty much non-existent for both Verdun and Tannenberg. And when you look around online, it seems that, yes, people are very impressed with the games, in terms of their mechanics, visually, etc. The matchmaking does seem to be struggling to finding other players, and the games are mostly filled with bots. I'm sure initially this isn't going to be a problem for Isonzo. Lots of players will buy the game at launch, and lots of players will flood in upon release. But it does raise the question, how many players are going to remain in the game long term? You know, what about 6 months from launch? What about a year from launch? Is it going to be back to the same problem, the same matchmaking issues? And for me, it kind of is worth asking the question, why did they make them as 3 separate games, rather than just having them as one game with 3 separate DLCs or sort of 3 campaigns? Surely that would have allowed the player numbers to be much more sustainable, because they could have had all those players not spread across 3 separate games, but all in one game, one central matchmaking system. And surely that would have made it more sustainable, and the matchmaking would have had a much easier time finding games for the various players. Matchmaking aside, the game does just look beautiful. As I mentioned earlier, I love the setting, and from the footage we get to see in the trailer, the Alps setting is just everything that I want. Weapon wise, we do only get to see a few clips, but one of the aspects that I really loved about both Verdun and Tannenberg was that the bulk of the infantry were equipped with bolt-action rifles. Machine guns, or at least heavy machine guns, were set up and deployed in emplacements, not 20 players running around hip-firing heavy machine guns Call of Duty style. We do get to, in the trailer, see one of the pioneers or sort of engineers in a form of steel armour, which looks really quite epic, but we know that trench armour existed in this period. Hopefully they don't implement it and make it like a juggernaut, but a little bit of extra protection works fine with me. In the offensive game mode, we know we shall be fighting between the 6th to the 8th of August 1916 in the battles of Sabatino and San Michele. If these two flanks are then successfully captured, the Italian faction are then going to be able to push on to help capture the city of Gorizia. I just love how the game is set into such real life history. Really enjoyable sort of going through the game's dev logs, some of which are kind of walking through the real life battlefields, and then how these are then integrated into the game. You can see some of the features in real life are then integrated into these battlefield maps, and that's really cool. All of this really sort of combines to create a very unique World War I game, and one that I'm personally very excited for. Sure, it will never have the following or player numbers of something like Battlefield, but it does have a small, core and very loyal following, and it just doesn't need the huge numbers for it to be an intensely fun game. I do hope, however, they can help maintain player numbers a little better this time around than on some of the previous games, and I do have slight concerns that maybe some of the previous players could have been put off by this being essentially the third standalone to the full cost game, as we did kind of see a smaller uptake of Tannenberg over Verdun, despite it essentially being an improved version of the game. I'm just going to leave you with the trailer now, without me sort of continuing to ramble on over it so you can watch it in peace, but hopefully you have enjoyed the video. If you do have any comments, are you excited for this game? Do let me know in the comments down below. Going to have lots more coverage on this game as it comes out into 2022, so do subscribe to the channel for more Isonzo content. Thanks for watching, guys, and I shall see you all on the next video.